Saliegh is the liaison for the Sharia board and Sharia product managers. Saliegh is also a member of the Boutique Exco and Sales Committee. Saliegh has 20 years of financial market experience encompassing the entire investment value chain from dealing with equity analysis, portfolio management and leadership. A big round of applause for Saliegh. Okay, so my eyesight was almost going, I didn't see you there. So a few things are happening today, Saliegh. I must tell you that Old Mutual forms a big part of this particular event. And therefore we thank you for getting involved and bringing the message across to society today. Please do continue with the hashtag. If you want us, like I said earlier on, to make the hashtag brighter behind you so that you can continue tweeting and going on Facebook, please continue doing that to enjoy. A big round of applause again. Saliegh Salaam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So I'm always very uncomfortable with very flattery introductions. But let me, for the next couple of minutes, at the behest of our hosts, give you a little bit of the story behind the story that you've just heard. A little bit about who Saliegh Salaam in fact is. So, the real story of Saliegh Salaam actually begins on Winter's Day, on a Wednesday, the 31st of July 1974, when I was born as the third eldest to my parents, Shariah Salaam and Abdurrahman Salaam. All my siblings are sisters, are women, and mashallah, they're all very strong women, so I'm quite familiar in kind of dealing with strong female characters, and I think it's quite necessary to actually have strong women out there in society. In addition, as a youngster, I suffered from very, very bad asthma. In fact, my parents tried everything to try and cure my asthma, taking me to all measures of traditional and specialist doctors. In fact, I was one of the first people in the country to actually have a portable nebulizer, and we didn't travel anywhere without this nebulizer. A few years later, tragedy struck our family when on the 20th of July 1982, my mother passed on at the very young age of around 37 or 38, giving our family a profound sense of loss, of course. And that was where I learned one of the first life lessons, is that ultimately life is very fragile. Nothing is permanent. And that we need to place our trust ultimately in the ever-living, the one who never dies, in Allah. Time moved on, and my father remarried. I then was fortunate to receive a bursary from Southern Life to study to become a chartered accountant. As part of my bursary conditions, I needed to do vacation work at Southern Life. And that's where I got exposed to the very, very exciting world of investments. I then decided, actually, I didn't want to become a CA. Investments is actually what I wanted to do. And that's also where I met Shams Patha, and I'll talk a little bit about him later. Whilst a student at UCT, I was very actively involved in the Islamic Society, and that's where I met my wonderful wife, Fatima Isap, who's also up there on the image. And she literally, and please take these words when I say literally, is the wife of my dreams. But that is a story on its own, and it's a story for another day. We then got married at 23. I don't know how many 23-year-olds there are who are married. We got married at 23, and at that time, we experienced our second major challenge, which was, as a young couple, we had to deal with significant cultural attitudes of entrenched intolerance towards difference of opinion. Alhamdulillah, we managed to overcome that, but that's where I learned my second lesson in life, which is the importance of not only respecting, but in fact seeking out difference of opinion. And that one of the beautiful aspects of creation and of life itself is this tapestry of diversity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And I was then to learn later on, actually, that as an investment professional, you actively needed to imbibe these qualities of seeking differences of opinion to be able to thrive in a world of complexity, in a world of massive information, that you needed to be able to assimilate differences of opinion and not be threatened by it. We also, over this time, alhamdulillah, were blessed with 3 kids who are also up there on the image, Khidr, Noor Muhammad, and Muhammad Mahdi. And we as a family, mashallah, we love traveling and we love engaging with other cultures. Now, I told you earlier a little bit about Shams Pather. So can you imagine, I'm this youngster coming out, or in fact, I was still a student, working at the investments industry, investments industry, and I'm seeing this senior director at that time. This is 1991, 1992. You can imagine it's still apartheid days. And we have a Muslim director. He was a director of Southern Life, leading the investments division. And I was so in awe of this man. And I managed to learn a lot from him, and I wanted to emulate him. And he really was one of the pioneers in the Muslim community, and in fact in the black community in the investments industry, in an industry that historically was dominated by whites. He was a trailblazer. So I was fortunate to meet him and to kind of, in a sense, work with him and benefit from him. The other person that played a very, very key role, more or less at the same time, was that I was very fortunate in my life. And one of the great blessings of my life, alhamdulillah, has been that I've met some really, really amazing people. And I think each and every one of you, one of the many prayers that you should make in your life is to meet amazing people that you can learn from and benefit from. People that you can take on as mentors. And one of those mentors has been, in my life, has been Sheikh Nazim, at the bottom right. And he was, and is regarded by many as one of the leading sort of spiritual luminaries of this nation in the last sort of 21st century or so. And we've been students of his for the last 20 years. At the top right, we have Leon Camphor. He founded Coronation and African Harvest. And I can remember the day very, very clearly. My eldest son, Muhammad Khidr, had just been born. He had literally just come home from hospital after having been born. I can see the image clearly in my mind as if it was yesterday. My mother-in-law carrying him in a wrapped up blanket. My wife walking through the door and the phone rings. And it's Leon Camphor on the other hand, on the other line. And he's telling me I got the job as an equity dealer at African Harvest. So he also gave me a really big break in my life. I was also fortunate to work with Tim Alsop. He's also very much regarded and respected as one of the top fund managers in the country. And all of them collectively helped to contribute towards my story. Now, one of the companions of Jesus asked him, how did you manage to get such a beautiful character? And so he told him, whenever I saw someone do a blameworthy act or display a blameworthy attribute, I taught myself to avoid those qualities. And whenever I saw somebody do something praiseworthy, I taught myself to perfect those qualities. And that's how he managed to get the character that he did. So why am I talking about that? Because mentorship is absolutely important. But everyone can be your mentor. Everyone can be your mentor. And everyone can teach you something. You just need to be open to it. I was asked, what does leadership mean to me? Ultimately, in my opinion, to try and answer that question, let's take a little look back. The leader of creation, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he exemplified in his manner and in his way in all facets of his life, the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of trying to be as beneficial to humanity as much as possible, of service, of mercy, and of noble character. In addition to that, when you look at his mentorship style, if you can use that word, his mentorship style towards his companions, he engaged with them not only in terms of who they were, but more importantly, in terms of who they could become, in terms of their potential. And in so doing, he was able to change them from literally the worst of their generation to the best of generations. So leadership ultimately to me means for each and every one of us to imbibe those qualities and to realize that we are his ambassadors. That is what leadership means to me. Coming back to my topic at hand, given that I've given you a little bit of the story now behind the story of Saliegh Salaam, my topic at hand is an interest in profit. To unpack that a little bit, first we have to try and answer, why does Islam prohibit interest? And let's try and explore that question from two angles. The first one is a rational angle, or let's call it a historical angle, and the second is an Islamic angle. Now let's look at the rational angle, because we have people here of other faiths. And Islam not only speaks to your heart, but it also speaks to your intellect. So let's address the intellect. Let's look at probably the most extreme example of the dangers of interest. In 1825, Haiti, seeking its independence from France, under threat of war, paid France 90 million francs for their independence. That 90 million francs earned interest. So they took on a debt of 90 million francs. That debt earned lots of interest and pretty exorbitant interest. Can anyone here in this room guess how long it took Haiti to pay that 90 million francs back? Any takers? They're not still paying it back. They've incurred other debts subsequent to that. It took them 122 years to pay back that debt. Let's rephrase that. It took them 5 generations to pay that back. Can you imagine? You incur debt, and your great-great-great-great-grandchildren are still paying off that debt. At certain points in their history, up to 80% of the country's income was directed towards paying off debt with interest. That means they only had 20% to see to housing, education, and everything else the country needs, which in turn then led to chronic economic instability over many generations, and in turn political instability over many generations. That's a very, very stark example why interest is so bad. A further reason is that Islam explicitly, by the sayings of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, and by the noble words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, explicitly prohibits interest. Can you imagine, ponder and reflect, that the Lord of mercy and His Prophet of mercy threatens war on the one who engages in consuming interest? So it is a very, very bad thing if someone who is known for mercy is prepared to engage in an act of war with you because of a particular act that you've done. So, how do we as a community then stay away from interest? Firstly, Muslim scholars from all walks of life, from all schools of thought, as we may say, who are specialists in the field of Islamic financial law, in 1991 came together and decided through consensus, as we would say, ijma, came together to develop a set of standards And these standards determine which transactions are deemed to be Sharia compliant or within the folds of the Sharia. Those standards are then used by different product providers across the world to create products that you and I can consume and use to engage in different financial transactions, whether it be for saving or whether it be for taking out a bond, as an example, or incurring debt. Now, I'm not really going to focus on the financing part of things. What I want to talk about really is the savings part of things. So why do we need to save in the first place? Right? We need to save in the first place, first and foremost, for two reasons. Of course, because we want to retire at some day, inshallah. Secondly, because we need to provide for our families financial, educational, and so on, well-being. That's why we save, to have that nest egg. Now that you've decided, or you've understood the importance of saving, one then needs to understand, or one may rightfully ask, okay, I've decided I'd like to save in a Sharia compliant way. If I save in a Sharia compliant way, I have two questions. The first question is, will my money grow? Will I be able to create wealth for myself and my family and see to their financial well-being? And number two, can only Muslims do this? Are only Muslims allowed to invest in these Sharia compliant products? Let's deal with those two questions. The first thing is, let's imagine you were there at the time when the Al Mutual Al Barakah Equity Fund was founded in July 1992. You invested R1 million, and I know R1 million in those days was a lot, but let's just use R1 million as an illustration. You invested R1 million in the Al Mutual Al Barakah Equity Fund. At the same time, you took R1 million and invested it in funds that were not Sharia compliant. And the third thing you did was, you took another R1 million and you said, I'm just going to invest it in the stock market as a whole. I don't really care whether it's Sharia compliant or not. 25 years later, you call up your financial advisor and you ask him, Mr. Financial Advisor, can you please tell me how much has that money grown to after 25 years? Your financial advisor would tell you that your investment in the average unit trust out there that was not Sharia compliant would have grown to around 23.5 million. It's quite a significant growth. Your other R1 million that you invested just in the stock market would have grown to 28.5 million rand. But your R1 million that you invested in the Al Mutual Al Barakah Equity Fund would have grown to 29.5 million rand. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call barakah. Right? It is barakah. You have a little, but you make it into a lot through Allah's qudrah, right? You invested in shares in an opportunity set that was smaller than what conventional managers and conventional investors who didn't care about Sharia compliant, but your money grew to much more than this. In fact, 6 million rand more than the average unit trust out there. 6 million rand, that's a lot of money, right? 6 million rand. So yes, it does create wealth. Secondly, the second question, can Muslims only invest in Sharia compliant product and not other people of other faiths? Okay, so I've got a test for you, right? If I'm going to put a plate of samosas here and savories and I'm going to have it out here on the table, on an imaginary table, is only Muslims going to eat that savories? No. In fact, you'll find that the people of other faiths, with the greatest of respect, they will be the first to go for it, right? Because they know our food is good. Right? They know our food is good. So no. People of other faiths can also invest in these products. And we estimate that around 20 to 25% of our investor base are people of other faiths. So what are some of the highs and lows that I've experienced professionally? From a professional perspective, the global financial crisis in 2007 was a really tough and traumatic time for me and my investment team. It was quite traumatic, going around the length and breadth of the country, sitting across investors like you, literally looking them in the eye, and them holding me and my team accountable for their financial losses. Knowing that this was their hard-earned savings that they had put away for their Hajj, or for their kids' education, or for some other financial need, and their money had suffered a temporary but significant loss. And holding me, and only me, accountable. It was quite tough, right? Yes, alhamdulillah, we have won some really, really great awards as well across our various funds. But perhaps one of the best highs that we as a team have had was a few years ago. We met a Maulana Khaldeen from Lenasia, and he told us their school trust fund, they invested their school trust fund assets into our Al Mutual Al Barakah equity fund. Their assets grew so much that they could take the growth on their capital, not the capital, just the growth on their capital, and use that growth on their capital to build an entire new school wing without touching their capital. That was perhaps one of the best kind of professional moments for me and my team, knowing that our efforts had generated those real world kind of outcomes in a way that tangibly affected people's lives directly. So why this slide, right? This slide looks quite perplexed. So what's the story behind this slide? As a community, rightfully, we are extremely obsessive, as we should be, about eating halal food. We will look for the certificate behind the certificate, right? Isn't it so? The certificate behind the certificate, and some certificates will be held in more esteem than others. Now, why is that? Because we as a community recognize the importance to our physical and spiritual beings of eating halal food. That's why. That's why. You can't, I try to explain this to my kids. Imagine putting diesel into a petrol car, right? It's going to create havoc. That's why we eat halal. Now, that same ethos and that same understanding and that same approach, sadly, doesn't permeate our consumption of financial product. But it should. It absolutely should, for all the reasons that I've highlighted. We as Muslims need to be not only the leaders in providing Sharia compliant product, but actually ethical product. Because as you can see, there's a growing movement globally for people to not only consume ethical food and produce and clothing, but equally financial product also. People are also increasingly concerned about that. So we spoke about the importance of saving. We also spoke about the importance of doing it in a way that is Sharia compliant. And we highlighted that that does not necessarily mean that you as a Muslim are going to get inferior returns by doing that. So why do we save? We ultimately save, using the words of Mark Twain. We save for the future. Why? Because that is where we're going to spend the rest of our life. But ladies and gentlemen, we also need to save and plan for the year after, because that is where we're going to spend our eternity. Let us not save for the future in a way that compromises our year after. Isn't it? That is what we're doing. We are saving for our financial futures in a way that compromises where we are going to spend eternity. So, hashtag, join the halal wealth movement. Join the halal wealth movement. Each and every one of you need to engage with your financial advisor. I'm not saying it must be an Old Mutual Sharia product. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you need to engage with your financial advisors, with your trustees of your pension funds, and you need to ask them, are there any Sharia compliant savings options available? You need to engage with them. Most of them will tell you that there is. And they will then facilitate a means for you to invest your pension fund in any one of the various Sharia compliant savings options that may be available. And alhamdulillah, our Muslim community here in South Africa have got a number of different alternatives. But we need to do that. We absolutely need to do that. And these trustees or financial planners will absolutely create the means and the facilitation for you to be able to do that. So, in conclusion, keep calm and earn halal money. Assalamu alaikum.